The once proud towers of Etherian lay broken against a sky choked with ash. Where crystalline spires had reflected the light of our binary suns, now only twisted metal and charred stone remained. I remember when those towers sang with the wind, their harmonic resonance a testament to our civilization's achievements. Now, they whispered only of death. In the underground shelter where thousands huddled, I watched as our engineers worked feverishly to maintain the distress beacon. It was our last hope, broadcasting a desperate plea to anyone who might be listening. Please, it repeated in every language we knew. Help us. The Draction are destroying everything. My daughter Rhea tugged at my sleeve. Father, will someone come? Her voice was small, barely audible above the hum of failing generators. I couldn't meet her eyes. How could I tell her that for 3 months we had been sending our call into the void, and no one had answered? The Galactic Council, those self-proclaimed guardians of interstellar peace, had deemed our plight an internal matter. We were expendable. Some of us remembered when Etherian had been the jewel of this sector. Our universities attracted scholars from across the galaxy. Our art galleries held masterpieces that made visitors weep. We had chosen peace, dedicating ourselves to culture rather than warfare. Perhaps that had been our greatest mistake. The Draction came without warning, their black ships blotting out our suns. They were conquerors, not negotiators. They didn't want our surrender. They wanted our annihilation. Their ground troops moved through our cities like a plague, their armor gleaming with the reflections of burning buildings. Those they didn't kill immediately were dragged to conversion chambers, where the screams echoed for hours before falling silent. I was head of the Science Council then, reduced now to a shadow of my former self, organizing supply distributions in dark tunnels. Above us, the surface had become a battlefield where the Draction hunted the remnants of our resistance. Each day, fewer returned from foraging missions. Signal incoming, called Merrick, our communications officer. His fingers flew across the makeshift console, coaxing life from salvaged components. It's different, not on standard frequencies. Hope was dangerous in times like these, but I felt it stirring nonetheless. Source: unknown. Wait. Marek's eyes widened. They're answering our distress call. They're coming. The message was brief, stuttering through our damaged receivers. Humanity, Earth. We're coming. Confusion rippled through the shelter. Earth? A backwater planet at the galaxy's edge. We knew of humans, of course, though few of us had ever encountered one. They were considered primitive by council standards, violent, unpredictable, barely worth notice. Why would they respond when more advanced civilizations had turned away? Ilias, one of our surviving elders, voiced what many were thinking. The humans? They're warmongers, barely evolved from their tribal origins. We've all heard the stories of their endless conflicts. They kill their own kind over resources, ideology, even faith. What help could they possibly offer? Any help is better than none, I countered, though privately I shared his doubts. The humans had a reputation for brutality that preceded them. Some called them mad dogs, others called them worse. But what choice did we have? The debate raged through the night, but in the end, we voted to accept their aid. Whatever the humans might be, they had answered when no one else would. As the meeting concluded, I found Rhea curled up in a corner, clutching her stuffed companion, a relic from happier times. They're coming, I told her softly. The humans are coming to help us. She looked up with those innocent eyes that had seen too much. Will they save us, Father? I wished I could be certain. We'll find out soon enough. Above us, the Draction patrols continued their systematic destruction. They seemed in no hurry. After all, where could we go? Little did they know that across the vast emptiness of space, ships were already altering course, engines burning hot as they raced toward Etherian. Humanity had heard our cry, and they were coming. None of us could have imagined what that would mean. When the sky cracked, the argument about humanity's offer had barely subsided when the sky above Etherian cracked open. Not the thunderous assault we'd grown accustomed to from Draction bombardments, but something else entirely. A sound like reality itself tearing apart. Multiple contacts, Merrick shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. They're everywhere. I rushed to the observation post, pressing my face against the periscope. Well, I saw defied belief. Ships, dozens, hundreds of them, were emerging from hyperspace, their hulls scarred and battle-worn. Unlike the sleek, predatory vessels of the Draxian, these were brutal things built for function over form. They bristled with weapons, their armor plating pockmarked from countless engagements. The lead ship, a massive carrier designated Terra's Fist, descended through the ash-choked atmosphere. Its landing thrusters carved great furrows in the devastated landscape as it settled a kilometer from our hidden entrance. Before the dust had settled, troops were deploying. Not the polished, ceremonial guards we might have expected from a diplomatic mission, but hardened soldiers moving with lethal precision. They're requesting entry, Merrick reported, his voice barely steady. They say they have Colonel Jace Willard to meet with our leadership. Within minutes, the humans were in our sanctuary. Colonel Willard strode into our makeshift council chamber, his armor scarred and his face weathered by countless battles. His eyes swept the room, taking in our emaciated forms, our desperate conditions. There was no pity there, only assessment. I'm Colonel Jace Willard, Earth Defense Fleet, he announced without preamble. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Ilias stepped forward, his bearing still proud despite our circumstances. With respect, Colonel, we must ask, why? The Galactic Council itself has abandoned us. Why would Earth intervene? Willard's laugh was harsh, without humor. The Council, he spat the words. They left us to die when the Krell invaded our colonies. Millions dead because we weren't civilized enough to warrant protection. We learned our lesson. Now, when we hear a cry for help, we answer it. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared through the shelter. Draxian Patrol, someone shouted. They've detected the human ships. What happened next changed everything. The Draxian squad that had terrorized us for months, elite hunters who had slaughtered hundreds of our people, encountered something they had never faced before, humans in combat. I watched through security feeds as Willard's soldiers moved like liquid death. Their weapons spat controlled bursts of energy, each shot finding its mark. They advanced methodically, using cover, communicating with hand signals, their movements coordinated with brutal efficiency. When two of their number fell to Draxian fire, the rest didn't hesitate or mourn. They simply adjusted their tactics and pressed forward. In minutes, it was over. The Draxian patrol lay dead, their superior technology meaningless against the humans' ferocity and tactical acumen. Willard's soldiers were already securing the perimeter, setting up defensive positions, treating their wounded with the same mechanical efficiency. That, Willard said, turning back to us, is how we fight. We don't negotiate with those who prey on the weak. We end them. Some of our people recoiled at the violence, at the cold efficiency of the killing. But others, those who had lost the most, who had seen their families dragged away or burned alive, looked at these humans with something like hope. Rhea had crept to my side during the battle. She peered through a gap in the blast doors, watching as the human soldiers moved among the fallen Draxian. One soldier, his armor stained with alien blood, knelt to help a wounded comrade. The contrast struck me, ruthless in battle, compassionate to their own. Father, Rhea whispered, they're not like the stories, are they? I considered her words. The humans we'd heard about were savages, barely controlled beasts. But what I saw was something different. Disciplined warriors who killed without pleasure, but with absolute necessity. They were exactly what we needed. No, I replied softly. They're not like the stories at all. That night, as we gathered to discuss our alliance with humanity, I noticed a change in our people. The despair that had hung over us like a shroud was lifting, replaced by something we hadn't felt in months. The possibility of survival. The humans had brought more than weapons. They had brought hope. But with that hope came a terrible question. What price would we pay for our salvation? As I watched Colonel Willard briefing his troops for the next engagement, I realized we were about to find out. Brutality for survival. The transformation of our people began with a simple demonstration. Colonel Willard gathered us in the main chamber, his scarred hands holding a small device. This, he said, pressing a button, is a proximity mine. Plan it correctly, and it can take out an entire Draction squad. Murmurs of discomfort rippled through the crowd. We had never used such weapons. Our defensive systems had relied on shields and non-lethal deterrents. The concept of hidden explosives designed to maim and kill was foreign to us. Ilias voiced our collective concern. Colonel, surely there are more civilized ways to defend ourselves? Our culture values life, even that of our enemies. Willard's response was immediate and brutal in its honesty. Your culture is dying. Your values mean nothing to corpses. The Draction don't understand mercy. They understand fear and death. We're going to teach them both. Over the following weeks, human instructors worked tirelessly to transform our civilians into fighters. They taught us guerrilla tactics, ambush techniques, and the art of improvised weapons. I watched as gentle scholars learned to set tripwires, as artists practiced knife fighting, as healers memorized human anatomy's weak points. The change was most pronounced in our youth. Rhea, despite her age, insisted on learning basic field medicine from human combat medics. I found her one day practicing sutures on synthetic skin, her small hands surprisingly steady. The humans say, I have talent, she told me proudly. They taught me how to stop bleeding with pressure points. Did you know humans have so many ways to save lives? And to take them, I reminded her gently. She nodded solemnly. Yes, but they say sometimes you have to take lives to save others. Is that true, Father? I couldn't answer. The philosophical debates that had once consumed our society seemed meaningless now. Survival had its own brutal logic. Not everyone adapted. Ilias led a faction that opposed what they called the corruption of our souls. During one heated council meeting, he stood and declared, if we become like them, like the humans, how are we different from the Draction? We're losing ourselves. Colonel Willard, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. You want to know the difference? The Draction kill for pleasure, for conquest. We kill to protect, to survive. That's the line between civilization and barbarism. Not the weapons you use, but why you use them. The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened next. A Draction raiding party, larger than any before, struck at our outer settlements. They came for slaves this time, not just destruction. By the time human and Etherian forces arrived, they had already taken dozens of our people, including children. What followed was my first true glimpse of human warfare unleashed. Willard led the counterattack personally. They tracked the Draction to their temporary holding facility, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of our ruined capital. The humans didn't negotiate. They didn't attempt to parley. They struck with overwhelming force, using tactics that seemed insane to us. Soldiers charged through kill zones, sacrificing themselves to create openings. Others scaled sheer walls under fire, dropped from aircraft into hostile positions, fought hand-to-hand when their weapons ran dry. I accompanied the medical team that followed the assault. What I saw in that warehouse will haunt me forever. The Draction had begun their conversion process on our people. The humans found them strapped to tables, their bodies partially transformed into something else, something monstrous. Colonel Willard stood among the carnage, his armor splattered with Draction blood. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw emotion in his eyes, not satisfaction, but a deep, burning rage. This is why we fight the way we do, he said quietly. Because the alternative is worse. That night, even Ilias was silent. We had seen the true face of our enemy, and we understood at last what the humans had been trying to tell us. Sometimes survival demands becoming something you never wanted to be. In the weeks that followed, our transformation accelerated. We learned to embrace the humans' methods, to set aside our qualms about violence. We became harder, more focused. The Etherian who emerged from human training were not the same people who had hidden in shelters, praying for rescue. Rhea summed it up best one evening as she cleaned her medical kit. We're still Etherian, she said, but now we're Etherian who fight back. Looking at my daughter, No longer the frightened child who had asked if anyone would hear our call, I realized the humans had given us more than weapons. They had given us the will to use them. Into the inferno. The battle for Cradle Canyon would become legend among our people. It was there, in that narrow defile where the Draxian had established their primary surface base, that Ethereum truly learned the meaning of war. Colonel Willard spread the tactical map across the command table, his finger tracing the canyon's serpentine path. Their overconfidence is our advantage, he explained. They fortified the obvious approaches but ignored the old mining tunnels your people abandoned centuries ago. I studied the plan with growing unease. It required our newly trained militia to navigate treacherous underground passages while human forces launched a frontal assault. The timing had to be perfect. Any delay would result in catastrophic casualties. The tunnels are unstable, I warned. Some sections flooded during the rainy season. Our people could be trapped. Willard nodded grimly. War is risk, Doctor. But those tunnels are our best chance to hit them where they're weakest. As dawn broke over the canyon, our forces moved into position. I commanded the Ethereum contingent, leading them through passages I had only read about in historical texts. The darkness pressed against us, broken only by the dim glow of our helmet lamps. Water dripped from ancient stonework, and more than once, we had to clear collapses that threatened to block our path. Above us, the human assault began with devastating fury. Even through meters of rock, we felt the concussions of their artillery. The Draxian response was immediate and violent. Energy weapons that turned sand to glass, defensive shields that lit the sky with otherworldly colors. Breach point in 3 minutes, crackled Willard's voice over our comms. Are you in position? I checked our location against the map. We were close, but debris blocked the final passage. Without thinking, I grabbed a plasma cutter from one of our engineers and began carving through the obstruction. Others joined me, working frantically as the sounds of battle intensified above. We emerged into the Draxian compound just as human drop troops landed in the central courtyard. The enemy, caught between two forces, reacted with characteristic brutality. Their soldiers, each a towering mass of bioengineered muscle and integrated weaponry, carved bloody paths through our ranks. I saw Rhea then, darting between cover with her medical kit. She had disobeyed my orders to stay with the reserve units, drawn by the cries of wounded on both sides. A Draxian warrior spotted her, its weapon rising to target the small figure. What happened next defined the alliance between our peoples. Private Marcus Corbin, a human soldier I barely knew, threw himself between Rhea and the energy blast. The shot meant for my daughter caught him full in the chest, burning through his armor. Rhea didn't hesitate. Even as the battle raged around her, she dragged Corbin to cover and began working to save his life. Her tiny hands, trained by human medics, applied emergency sealant to the wound, administered stimulants to keep his heart beating. The sight galvanized our forces. Ethereum and human soldiers fought with renewed fury, pushing deeper into the compound. I found myself beside Colonel Willard, both of us covered in dirt and blood, neither sure whose blood it was. Your daughter, he said between bursts of gunfire, has more courage than most soldiers I've known. I could only nod, my throat tight with pride and fear. The battle lasted 7 hours. When it ended, the Draxian stronghold lay in ruins, their forces either dead or in full retreat. But victory came at a terrible cost. Nearly a third of our combined forces had fallen, and many more bore wounds that would never fully heal. That evening, as funeral pyres lit the canyon walls, I found Rhea sitting beside Corbin's bed in the field hospital. He would live, though the scars would be permanent. They were talking quietly, the human soldier and the Ethereum child, bridging the gulf between our species with simple words of gratitude and friendship. Colonel Willard joined me, watching the same scene. You know what's coming next, he said softly. The Draxian won't accept this defeat. They'll respond with everything they have. I nodded, feeling the weight of leadership like never before. The Sky Bastion, their floating fortress. It has to fall, Willard confirmed. or everything we've done here means nothing. Looking at the funeral pyres, at the wounded being tended by healers from both our peoples, I understood something fundamental had changed. We were no longer two species fighting a common enemy. We had become something new, a fusion of Etherian wisdom and human ferocity. When do we attack? I asked. Willard's smile was grim. As soon as your people are ready to finish what we've started. In the days that followed, as we planned the assault on the Sky Bastion, I watched our people train with new determination. They had tasted victory, paid its price in blood, and found they were willing to pay it again. The philosophers and artists of Etherian had become warriors, tempered in the forge of human warfare. Somewhere in the command center, Rhea was learning advanced battlefield medicine. Somewhere in the training grounds, Elias was teaching young soldiers the weak points in Draxian anatomy. And somewhere in space, the Sky Bastion floated serenely, unaware that its doom approached on wings of human steel and Etherian resolve. Bow or rise up. The Sky Bastion hung in the stratosphere like a malevolent moon, its weapons platforms capable of striking any point on Etherian surface. For months, it had been the symbol of Draxian dominance, untouchable, unassailable. Colonel Willard stood before our combined command staff, pointing to the holographic display of our target. The Bastion's shields are its primary defense, he explained, but they're designed to repel external attacks. They never considered someone might attack from within. Our plan was audacious, perhaps suicidal. Using captured Draxian transport codes, infiltration teams would dock with the Bastion under the guise of bringing supplies. Meanwhile, the main fleet would launch a diversionary assault, drawing the fortress's defenses outward. Ilias, now bearing the scars of combat, stepped forward. I'll lead the infiltration team. My knowledge of Draxian technology may prove useful. I started to object. Ilias was too valuable to risk, but the look in his eyes stopped me. The philosopher who had once questioned the morality of violence now stood ready to strike at the heart of our oppressors. I'll go too, Rhea announced from the doorway. She wore combat medic gear, her young face set with determination. The infiltration team will need medical support. Absolutely not, I began, but Colonel Willard raised his hand. She's proven herself, Doctor. And she's right. We'll need medics inside. He turned to Rhea. You'll be under Corbin's protection. He volunteered the moment he heard you were going. The assault began at dawn. Human warships, their hulls painted with Etherian symbols of defiance, engaged the Bastion's outer defenses. Energy beams crisscrossed the sky, turning the morning into artificial day. Beneath this spectacular display, 3 modified transports approached the fortress's docking bays. I commanded the ground operation, coordinating with resistance cells across the planet. As the space battle raged, we struck at Draxian outposts, preventing reinforcements from reaching the Bastion. Through my scope, I watched the fortress respond to our attacks, its massive guns swiveling to target the human fleet. Infiltration team has docked, came Elias's voice over the encrypted channel. Beginning operation. What followed was the longest hour of my life. Reports filtered in sporadically. The team had reached the shield generators. Rhea was treating wounded prisoners. Corbin's squad was pinned down near the command center. Each transmission brought new fears, new hopes. Then Elias's voice, strained but triumphant. Charges set. Shield generators will fall in 10 minutes. But there's a problem. Report, Willard demanded. The Bastion's commander, Varkol, has initiated a surface bombardment protocol. If we don't stop him, he'll glass the entire continent before the shields fall. The implications were clear. Someone would have to stay behind to ensure the charges detonated while preventing the bombardment. Someone would have to die. I'll do it, Elias said simply. Get the others out. No, I shouted into the comm. There has to be another way. There isn't. His voice was calm, at peace. This is what we've been fighting for. The chance to choose our fate, not have it chosen for us. Tell my students. Tell them I finally understood. The next few minutes were chaos. The infiltration team fought their way back to the transports, Corbin carrying a wounded Rhea who had been hit while evacuating prisoners. As their ship cleared the docking bay, the Bastion's shields flickered and died. Human ships pressed their advantage, pouring fire into the now vulnerable fortress. But the true blow came from within. Ilias, in a final act of defiance, overloaded the Bastion's main reactor. The explosion was visible from the surface, a new sun born and dying in the same instant. As debris rained down across the continent, the Draxian command structure collapsed. Leaderless, their forces retreated to their remaining ships and fled the system. After 6 months of occupation, Aetherion was free. In the aftermath, as we tended to our wounded and counted our dead, Colonel Willard found me watching the sunset from a hilltop overlooking our ruined capital. "You've won your world back," he said. "What will you do with it?" I thought of Ilias, of all those who had died to give us this chance. Rebuild, but not as we were. We can't go back to being the peaceful scholars who ignored the galaxy's dangers. Willard nodded approvingly. "The fleet will leave some weapons, trainers to help you establish a proper defense force. This sector needs civilizations that can stand on their own. Will you stay?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. He shook his head. "There are other worlds crying out for help. Other species learning what you've learned. That the galaxy isn't kind to the weak." He paused, looking at the stars beginning to appear. "But we'll be watching. And if you need us again, we'll call." I finished. "And next time, maybe we'll be the ones answering someone else's cry for help." As Willard departed to prepare his fleet for departure, Rhea joined me on the hilltop. Her arm was in a sling, but her eyes were clear and strong. "Corbin asked me to give you a message," she said. "He said humans have a tradition. When warriors part ways, they promise to meet again, even if they know they might not." "And what did you tell him?" She smiled, looking impossibly mature for her age. "I told him Aetherion has traditions too. We remember those who fought beside us. We honor their sacrifices. And yes, we hope to meet again." Together, we watched as the human fleet prepared for departure. Their ships, scarred from battle, rose through the atmosphere like metal phoenixes. They had come as saviors and left as friends, having taught us the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes, to preserve what you love, you must be willing to fight for it. In the months that followed, Aetherion did rebuild. Our cities rose again, but now they included defensive installations. Our universities reopened, but now they taught military strategy alongside philosophy. Our children learned art and music, but also marksmanship and tactical medicine. And in the center of our new capital, we erected a monument, a human and an Aetherion standing back to back, weapons ready, eyes scanning the horizon. The inscription read, "We beg the galaxy for help." Only humanity heard our cry. They did not come to save us. They came to teach us to save ourselves. As I stood before that monument on its dedication day, I thought of Ilias's final words. We had understood at last. The galaxy was not cruel, merely indifferent. But in that indifference, we had found an unexpected ally, a species as flawed and violent as any other, but one that remembered what it meant to stand alone against the dark. The humans had given us more than victory. They had given us the strength to face whatever came next. And in the vast, uncaring cosmos, that was the greatest gift of all. From time to time, we would receive transmissions from the human fleet, updates on their interventions across the galaxy. Each message ended the same way. "If you need us, call. We'll be listening." And we knew they would be. For in the darkest hour of our civilization, when we had begged the galaxy for help, only humanity had heard our cry. They had come not as conquerors or saviors, but as teachers of the hardest lesson, that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to master war. The stars still held dangers. The galaxy still turned with cold indifference. But Aetherion no longer stood defenseless. We had learned to fight, to sacrifice, to protect what we cherished. And somewhere out there, sailing between the stars, the humans continued their eternal vigil, ready to answer the next cry for help. In the end, that was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not their weapons or their tactics, but their unwavering commitment to stand with those who stood alone. They had heard our cry and answered it, not with platitudes or diplomacy, but with blood and steel and sacrifice. And for that, Aetherian would be eternally grateful.